Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Abhineet Shukla and with me is Aditi Lumba, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Modi asserts BRICS nations could emerge as engines of post-COVID global growth. 14th BRICS Summit to be hosted by China on Thursday. Death toll from earthquake in eastern Afghanistan rises to over 1,000. India expresses grief and offers assistance to the people of Afghanistan. Flood situation in the Brahmaputra Valley abates. Tamil Nadu sends second batch of relief material to Sri Lanka. And Indian women's hockey beat the United States 4-0 at the FIH Pro League at Rotterdam in Netherlands. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asserted that India supports innovation across every sector, including drones, green energy and space. The Prime Minister addressed the BRICS Business Forum virtually Wednesday evening. Highlighting the strength of the Indian economy, he said, there is an opportunity to invest $1.5 trillion under the country's national infrastructure pipeline.
आज जब पूरा विश्व पोस्ट कोविड रिकवरी पर फोकस कर रहा है, तब ब्रिक्स देशों की भूमिका एक बार फिर बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रहेगी। महामारी से उत्पन्न आर्थिक समस्याओं से निपटने के लिए हमने भारत में रिफॉर्म, परफॉर्म एंड ट्रांसफॉर्म का मंत्र अपनाया है और इस अप्रोच के परिणाम भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था के परफॉर्मेंस से स्पष्ट है। इस साल हम 7.5% ग्रोथ की आशा कर रहे हैं, जो हमें फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग मेजर इकोनॉमी बनाता है।
Mr. Modi said, by 2025, India's digital sectors will cross $1 trillion valuation. He said, India's success is based on technology-led growth. He said that even during COVID-19, the government emphasized on ease of living, building infrastructure with PM Gati Shakti, digital transformation and digital economy. The Prime Minister said, to deal with the economic problems arising out of the pandemic, India has adopted the mantra of reform, perform and transform.
भारत की वर्तमान इकोनॉमिक रिकवरी का एक प्रमुख स्तंभ टेक्नोलॉजी लेड ग्रोथ है। हम हर सेक्टर में इनोवेशन को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं। महामारी के दौरान भी भारत ने ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस सुधारने के लिए अनेकों प्रयास जारी रखे। बिजनेस पर कंप्लायंस बर्डन कम करने के लिए हजारों नियमों में बदलाव किया गया। सरकारी पॉलिसीज और प्रोसीजर्स में अधिक पारदर्शिता और स्थिरता लाने के लिए बड़े पैमाने पर काम हो रहा है।
Mr. Modi added that this year India is expecting 7.5% growth, which will make it the fastest growing major economy. The Prime Minister said BRICS could emerge as engines of global growth. He added that the role of BRICS countries will be very important as the world focuses on post-COVID recovery. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will attend two-day 14th BRICS Summit hosted by China beginning Thursday. The summit will be held in a virtual format under the theme of Foster High-Quality BRICS Partnership, usher in a new era of global development. Chinese President Xi Jinping will also chair a high-level dialogue on global development with guest countries on the 24th of June. India's Ministry of External Affairs said that BRICS has become a platform for discussing and deliberating on issues of common concern for all developing countries. BRICS countries have regularly called for reform of the multilateral system in order to make it more representative and inclusive. During the 14th BRICS Summit, deliberations are expected to be held in areas including terrorism, trade, traditional medicine, environment, science and technology, and micro, small and medium enterprises. The discussions are also likely to be held on issues like reform of the multilateral system, combating COVID-19 pandemic, and global economic recovery. A report from our Beijing correspondent.
Ahead of the BRICS summit to be held tomorrow, high-level engagements begin from today when all the 5 state leaders, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi, will address a virtual opening ceremony of the BRICS Business Forum. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal will also participate in a panel discussion on resilience of industry and supply chains. Many Indian business leaders will also participate. 14th BRICS Summit this year assumes importance as this will be the first BRICS Summit amid geopolitical tectonic shifts taking place due to Russia-Ukraine war and Russia, one of the BRICS members, coming under severe economic sanctions by the US. China and Russia has also expressed their willingness to discuss the expansion of BRICS group, which at present comes Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. BRICS New Development Bank has already expanded and included UAE, Bangladesh, Uruguay and Egypt. For World News, All India Radio, Beijing.
In Afghanistan, over 1,000 people have died and 1,500 others injured following an earthquake of magnitude 6.1 which hit Paktika province this morning. According to the reports, the disaster management official said the toll is expected to grow. The Interior Ministry official Salahuddin Ayubi said authorities had launched a rescue operation and helicopters were being used to reach the injured and take in medical supplies and food. The quake is the deadliest since 2002. The landlocked country's eastern province of Paktika was the most affected, with reports of significant damage from the areas of Gyan, Nakai, Barmal and Zarag. In Kosh province, the area of Seprai also felt tremors in the morning. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed sadness on the news of the devastating earthquake in Afghanistan. In a tweet, he expressed condolences on loss of precious lives. Mr. Modi said India stands by the people of Afghanistan in their difficult times and is ready to provide all the possible disaster relief material at the earliest. In a tweet, the External Affairs Ministry spokesperson, Mr. Arindam Bagchi, said India shares the grief of the people of Afghanistan and remains committed to provide assistance and support in this hour of need.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be on a 3-day visit to Germany and the UAE from the 26th of this month. Mr. Modi will attend the G7 summit to be held at Schloss Elmau under the German presidency on 26th and 27th of this month. During the summit, he is expected to speak in 2 sessions that include environment, energy, climate, food security, health, gender equality and democracy. Argentina, Indonesia, Senegal and South Africa have also been invited in an effort to strengthen international collaboration on these important issues. The G7 countries are Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, the United States and the European Union. In India's northeastern state of Assam, the flood situation improved slightly in Brahmaputra Valley due to better weather conditions, and only Brahmaputra and Kopili rivers are flowing above the danger level. However, the situation remains critical in the 3 districts of Barak Valley. Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma is visiting Morigaon and Nagaon districts on Wednesday to take stock of the flood situation. India's eastern neighbor Bangladesh has also been severely affected by the floods. In Assam, over 5,500 villages were affected in 32 districts over the last 8 days.
Elsewhere, China is facing an extremely severe and complex flood situation caused by incessant rainfalls affecting around 1 million people in the different parts of the country. The state media, terming it as a once-in-a-century flood situation, reported that extreme weather likely caused by climate change has plagued China. Persistent heavy rains have continued to batter parts of China, swelling rivers, triggering landslides and prompting the relocation of people in recent days. For several days, continuous heavy rainfall has hit a large area in southern China, with the Pearl River Basin seeing a continuous rise in the water levels of its main rivers, including the Xijiang and the Beijiang rivers. Our Beijing correspondent reports that the Pearl River Basin is a manufacturing and trade hub in South China and is again facing a worsening situation of emergency workers, with manufacturing and supply chains hit, even as it could not recover from COVID-19 related restrictions.
The Tamil Nadu government sent the second batch of relief material for Sri Lanka on Wednesday. State ministers including Geeta Jeevan and Senji Mastan flagged off a merchant vessel to Colombo. The vessel is carrying 14,700 metric tons of rice, 250 tons of milk powder and 50 tons of essential medicines. More from our correspondent.
The Ministry of External Affairs is coordinating the handing over of the relief materials from the state government to Sri Lanka. The first batch of the 8 materials were flagged off from Chennai port on the 18th May, which included over 40,000 metric tons of rice, milk powder and medicines. The state government on 29th April announced the relief aid to the neighbouring country, which is currently facing economic hardships. Many individuals and organizations contributed to the Chief Minister's Relief Fund to mobilize the relief materials. Jai Singh, AR News, Chennai.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on the BRICS Summit 2022 and its significance. In conversation are Dilip Sinha, a former diplomat, and Manish Anand, a journalist.
The 14th BRICS Summit is going to begin from tomorrow. The Chinese President Xi Jinping will address the meeting in a virtual mode. The meeting is, by the way, taking place in a virtual mode. And the theme of the meeting is foster high-quality BRICS partnership, usher in a new era of global development. The BRICS Summit, we know that it's a partnership, it's a bloc for the emerging economies and the developing countries. And there is a sort of commentary where the theme of the meeting is stated to be combating global hunger and reducing poverty. Ambassador Sinha, how do you see the virtual meeting of the 14th BRICS Summit, that too in the context of the Europe war that is taking place between Russia and Ukraine, and at the same time, the consequent global economic disruption that the world is facing right now?
Thank you, Manish, for having me. BRICS has had a very unusual origin. As you know, the idea of BRICS was conceived not as a group of countries, but it was merely an identification of some economies in the world which held the promise of becoming major economies that could participate in the international economy. And this identification was done by a British economist who worked for Goldman Sachs. And he identified 4 countries at that time that held a great promise as emerging economies. The idea of converting this into a group of cross-regional consultations among leaders came from Russia 5 years later. And then it surprisingly picked up very well. It picked up as an idea of 4 countries at that time, and later South Africa was added as the 5th country, as a group of countries that were different from the Western economies and that offered an alternative model of development and cooperation, and which were prepared to cooperate with each other in helping other countries that were not among the advanced economies of the world to develop themselves. So it became a forum for cross-regional consultations. It offered an alternative model of development, and it offered development assistance to countries. So as part of the progress that was made by BRICS, it set up the new development bank and it set up a contingent reserve fund. The bank has been doing reasonably well. But over the years, as you mentioned, certain developments have taken place that have changed the dynamic of the global order as it existed when Jim O'Neill first conceived of this group of 4 countries. And that comes from the fact that first was the global financial crisis that took place in 2008-2009, and then China's rise, and now you have the Ukraine war, which has polarized the world and brought back the Cold War in its full form. So BRICS has become a kind of a group which is now struggling to find its role that it had originally had been conceived for it and its leaders had imagined. Because for India, BRICS was an expression of multipolarity, which is one of the things that we have always wanted, especially when BRICS was conceived 20 years ago. That was the period of the orthodoxy of market fundamentalism and the dominance of one system and one country in the world. So India was very keen to develop a multipolar world. Today, the situation is quite different. And in this, India is now balancing its relations with both groups and chalking out its own course forward through bilateral cooperation with individual countries, especially by signing the FTAs with countries like the UAE and Australia, and now negotiating with the EU and the UK. But at the same time, BRICS retains its relevance as a cross-regional consultative forum where countries that are there from different continents come together and discuss the global system and offer the world the possibility of reconciliation and moving forward together rather than in a bipolar setting. Now, whether that is possible or not, only time can tell. But the effort is certainly being made. It's not going to be easy in this highly polarized atmosphere.
Indeed, Ambassador Sinha, you have rightly summarized the context. But right now, the principal challenge to the global economy appears to be the energy crisis. And we have seen that China has become the largest importer of oil from Russia, and India is also importing oil from Russia in big quantity, and alternative arrangement for the trade is being deployed. In the context of the American-led sanctions against Russia and the way Russia does it, how do you think that the BRICS would be navigating to a situation where its developmental needs are addressed, principally the energy needs?
For India's relations with Russia are not in the same league as China's relations. China has actually supported Russia in its invasion of Ukraine, and it has strengthened its relations with Russia, and China has now emerged as the largest buyer of Russian oil. In the case of India, our purchases of oil from Russia have increased, but they are minuscule both for Russia and for India, and of very little importance in terms of the importance that the oil exports of Russia have today in the world. So in this context, the important thing for India is not necessarily to look at BRICS as the only forum. In fact, India, if you would have noticed, has joined the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that's been proposed by the US recently at the Quad Summit in Tokyo. So India is clearly positioning itself in a manner in which it is putting its own national interests first and keeping its options open, and also ensuring that its relations with neither side get affected by the Ukraine war. But it does not support the war effort in any case, and it's not supporting Russia's invasion. So on that count, there's a clear distinction between the position of China and India. Now, whether India will be able to influence the behavior of Russia and China in the framework of BRICS to be able to moderate their position and perhaps reduce the tensions of the new Cold War that is taking place in the world today, one does not know. One hopes that such efforts will succeed. But the fact remains that today, China, as you mentioned, is the dominant economy of the world. And China, in fact, is investing much more through its Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which it set up around the same time as the New Development Bank of BRICS. And China's investment in the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank is higher than in the New Development Bank, which incidentally is also based in Shanghai. So for China, the priority is its own bilateral development assistance rather than using BRICS. And for India, as I mentioned earlier, the priority is to move forward with its own FTAs and its partnership in the IPEF. So one has to see how BRICS shapes up in the months coming ahead, because it clearly is going through a situation where the global order is a lot different from the one in which it was conceived.
Ambassador Sinha, I would like to draw your attention to a couple of things. In late March, the Chinese foreign minister had come to India, and the Indian foreign minister S. Jaishankar had done a lot of plain speaking to him in the context of the Chinese army camping across the line of actual control in Ladakh. And we had, in fact, suggested that the ties between India and China cannot be normal if there is tension on the border. That is one thing. And second is that India's key positioning in the Pacific Quads, which we have seen in the Quad Summit at Tokyo, and now India would be taking in another sort of a Quad with Israel and UAE and the US. Now, there is an attempt on the part of China to portray this 14th BRICS Summit to convey a sort of message to the West. So do you think that India will need to be cautious to China's posturing at this summit?
Yes, I entirely agree with you that India needs to be extremely conscious about the kind of image that China projects of this BRICS summit that it is holding in China today. Of course, it's a virtual summit. The fact that India's bilateral relations with China are tense, China's behavior on the line of actual control has been anything but friendly. China's own relations with the neighbors of India through its economic policy of debt diplomacy has strained relations with these countries and also with India. And as I mentioned, if BRICS was an expectation of the rise of a multipolar world, then that certainly has been set aside by the fact that China itself has risen, and China looks upon itself now as a superpower, which is the leader of the second pole in this bipolar world. So in this kind of a situation, India has to be extremely careful in positioning itself within BRICS and re-examine its priorities in this area, because if China is going to use BRICS to create its own group dominated by it, then clearly it does not meet the expectations that we had of BRICS as a multipolar goal of a multipolar world. In this situation, the initiatives that we have taken in the Indo-Pacific are extremely important for us. So today, if we are looking at a balanced world in which there is less of power politics and more of international cooperation based upon national sovereignty, then one has to look at other forums and perhaps bilateral forums to promote that, rather than with a forum that is sought to be dominated by China.
Ambassador Sinha, I would like you to have a quick comment on the BRICS, one of the mandates to seek reforms of the multilateral system. In the context of the World Trade Organization recently, in fact last week only, did accept demands of the developing countries on food grains and vaccine equity. Do you think that the BRICS indeed has some sort of relevance still to pursue reforms at the multilateral forums like the United Nations?
Well, BRICS had started with these ideas, but as far as the United Nations are concerned, there the answer is very simple. In the United Nations, the issue is the reform of the Security Council, where India wants a permanent seat, but the country blocking that most prominently is China. So BRICS certainly cannot be a forum for that. As far as WTO is concerned, an effort can be made in that direction, but we must remember that China is also a problem country in the WTO, because China claims to continue with the status of a developing country, whereas it has become the world's second largest economy and the world's largest trading country. In this kind of an environment, China has to start taking more responsibilities as a major power, rather than hide behind the facade of a developing country. And this issue came up in the recent WTO conference. That's a longer debate about how China conducted itself over there. But the fact remains that as far as the WTO is concerned, it's an organization that is in disarray at the moment. It has made modest progress in the last meeting that took place, but it needs to do a lot to strengthen and revive itself as the regulator of world trade.
Indeed. We will be keenly watching the 14th BRICS summit, in which the Russian President Vladimir Putin will be taking part. Ambassador Sinha, you have given us a lot of insight. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Manish.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar is on a 4-day visit to Kigali in Rwanda from Wednesday to attend the 26th Commonwealth Heads of Government meet on CHOGM. He will be leading the Indian delegation to the CHOGM, which had been postponed twice due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The theme of the summit is Delivering a Common Future, Connecting, Innovating, Transforming. During the meeting, the leaders of the Commonwealth member states are scheduled to deliberate on issues of global challenges like climate change, food security and health issues. Moving on to sports, in hockey, the Indian women's team defeated the United States by 4-0 in the FIH Pro League at Rotterdam in Netherlands. The victory follows a brilliant performance by the Indian side, which beat the United States by 4-2. India is at the third spot in the standings with 30 points behind leaders Argentina and the Netherlands.
India and Australia reviewed defence cooperation and discussed ways to enhance further cooperation on Wednesday. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and visiting Australian Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence Richard Marles held a bilateral meeting in New Delhi. During the meeting, they reviewed the defence and security pillars of the India-Australia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. The two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to the implementation of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership based on mutual interest and understanding, common interest and shared values of democracy and rule of law. They also welcomed the growing diversity and frequency of defence exercises and exchanges between the two countries and undertook to build upon operational engagements through the India-Australia Mutual Logistics Support Arrangement. Both ministers agreed to improve the India-Australia Joint Working Group JWG on defence research and material cooperation, which will meet in Australia later this year. Both sides also agreed to explore means to grow connections and opportunities between Indian and Australian defence industrial bases. In the meeting, they welcomed the plan to commence the landmark General Rawat Young Officer Exchange Program in the latter half of 2022. The ministers also reviewed strategic challenges and the regional security situation and reaffirmed their shared objective of an open, free, inclusive, prosperous and rules-based Indo-Pacific region. Earlier in the day, the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister of Australia visited the National War Memorial and paid homage to the war heroes by laying a wreath at the monument.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Prasar Bharati Beijing reports India consulate in Guangzhou joined the Garden Ring for yoga to celebrate 8th International Day of Yoga. The Guardian reports 5 police officials in the northern Chinese city of Tangshan are being investigated over their handling of a vicious attack on a group of women at a restaurant. Reuters reports Taiwan scrambled jets on Tuesday to warn away 29 Chinese aircraft in its air defense zone, including bombers that flew to the south of the island and into the Pacific in the latest uptick in tensions and largest incursion since late May. Foreign policy writes China's third aircraft carrier is aimed at a post-US Asia and is prepared to compete with the US. But Beijing can't challenge the US naval power directly yet. The Khabur Hub report says that the General Secretaries of the Nepali Congress, NC Gagan Kumar Thapa and Bishwa Prakash Sharma have demanded the bodies concerned to make arrangements for voting rights to Nepali citizens living abroad. The Himalayan Times report says that the Pankaj Bikram Nembang has been elected chairperson of the All Nepal Football Association. The Khabur Hub report says the Embassy of India in Kathmandu celebrated the 8th International Day of Yoga on Tuesday. The Annapurna Express writes that CPN-UML chairman KP Sharma Oli has said that there should be a national consensus among major political parties on the fundamental issues of foreign policy and international relations.
The Balochistan Post report that the Frontier Corps FC personnel on Tuesday evening opened fire at a vehicle of Baloch oil trader in Dalabalandin area of Balochistan's Chaki district in which a woman was seriously injured. The Balochistan Post says in a report an identified gunman shot dead a levies official in Khara district of Balochistan on Tuesday. The nation reports that over 450 Sikh pilgrims arrived through Wagha border crossing to observe the 183rd death anniversary of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Dawn Light's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said on Tuesday that in the budget for the fiscal year 2022-23, the ruling coalition government had decided to redistribute the economic burden on the poor by taxing the rich. Daily Times reports that Prime Minister Muhammad Shehbaz Sharif on Tuesday paid rich tributes to Shaheed Benazir Bhutto and said the void created by her martyrdom would never be filled. A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Modi asserts BRICS nations could emerge as engines of post-COVID global growth. 14th BRICS Summit to be hosted by China on Thursday. Death toll from earthquake in eastern Afghanistan rises to over 1,000. India expresses grief and offers assistance to the people of Afghanistan. Flood situation in the Brahmaputra Valley abates. Tamil Nadu sends second batch of relief material to Sri Lanka. Indian women's hockey team beat the United States 4-0 at the FIH Pro League at Rotterdam in Netherlands. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Belgium. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.